Welcome to this new Converse Talk where we will deep dive into blockchain. I remember around 2015, we started with a blockchain practice at Globant. I remember back then there was a huge fuss around the concept, and we got a lot of projects that were sort of exploratory around the technologies. But when it came to moving into a production environment, it was quite difficult. There were a lot of shortcomings in terms of cost, speed, performance around those technologies that prevented that from moving into a real case scenario. So the actual application of blockchain technologies remained very tied to cryptocurrency. Lots of things have changed since those early days. The rise of newer technologies, smart contracts, NFTs, etc., have made a surge in the technologies. So nowadays we see lots of applications, real world applications, and that's what we propose to discuss, among other things. We have an incredible agenda for today. First, for all of you interested in taking the first steps in blockchain, we'll host a TED Talk with Alan Berner, where we'll go through the basic concepts towards becoming a blockchain engineer. Alan is one of the most knowledgeable persons when it comes to blockchain technologies within Globant. We'll then host a fireside chat where we'll be hearing from Santiago City about blockchain applications and how they can drive social impact. Santiago is an entrepreneur and president of Democracy Earth Foundation. Topics such as identity, voting, financial inclusions, and more will be covered. It will get very, very interesting. So please hold on. And later, we all know about blockchain and how it's making radical changes across multiple industries. And the art and music industry is one of them. We'll be hearing firsthand from Facundo Migoya, co-founder of Enigma, about how blockchain is disrupting this industry with the rise of NFTs. So if you're ready to get inspired, connect, and learn, let's begin. Let me introduce you to Alan. He's the co-founder of Atix Labs, a company that has recently joined the Globant family. And he has a long track record working with blockchain technologies. Alan, welcome.
Hi, Diego. Thanks for having me here.
Sorry? Very nice to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
So, Alan, first of all, I know you will be talking about blockchain, especially for those wanting to start with the initial steps in these technologies, but I was wondering about how were your first steps in this? How did you stumble upon this?
Okay, that's quite a funny story because I remember back then we were working on like standard Web 2 projects, like standard backends and stuff. And one of the guys on our team, actually our first employee, which is still working with us, he started mentioning about Bitcoin, right? Actually, we have witnessed the Ethereum launch, and we said, "What the fuck is that, right? What's this?" And then we needed to look for a new office. We went to an office which was the Bitcoin Embassy in Argentina. It was like a co-working space full of crypto companies, and then we got into it. And actually, the first project I started as a backend developer, working on a kind of like an ICO before it was. It was widely spread over Ethereum, and then I switched to protocols. So, actually that's what I'm going to talk about. Like where you can start doesn't define where you are going to end, right, in this industry, which is huge.
Excellent story, Alan. Thank you very much, and your show.
Okay. All right. So we're going to, as Diego said, we're going to do a quick dive into Web3 development. Actually, this kind of like, it's like a fancy title to get you engaged, but actually you're going to get a little bit technical, and I'm going to guide you through all the whole blockchain development ecosystem, okay? So let's start presenting myself. I'm Alan. As Diego said, I'm the co-founder, and I was the CTO of Atix Labs, so I'm a technical person. And we were working with blockchain since 2014, right? We work on protocols, wallet explorers, decentralized apps, development tools, bridges, whatever you can imagine, we have been working with, right? And some interesting projects that I usually mention because at least they were inspiring to me. I was an Ethereum Classic Scala node developer. I'm going to explain what does that mean. And actually, I also work on a backend side, working in the Cardano and Coinbase integration. Coinbase is one of the biggest exchanges in the world, right? Okay, so the agenda goes like this. First, we're going to have like a brief blockchain interaction. It's not going to be super detailed, but it's going to give you an idea of the kind of topics that we are talking about when dealing with blockchains. And maybe this is the starting point for you. You need to look for this information over internet. And then I'm going to give you my understanding of what does it mean to work with blockchains, right? And then as a final step, we are going to debunk some myths about blockchain development because they are worth mentioning. Okay, let's get started with the first one. So I'm going to read this one. Blockchain is a decentralized ledger where information is shared and stored across peer-to-peer network, right? This definition might sound pretentious, but let's try to break it in small pieces, right? So what I have highlighted here is the words ledger and store, right? So this resembles to databases, right? So basically a blockchain is a ledger. A ledger is a data structure and it's used to store data. Think of them like a fancy database. But it has some differentiators. The first one is decentralized, which means that the database is not hosted nor controlled by a single party, right? It's not like it's not that you're running the server and you have control over it, but you don't also have control, for example, to like a replica, like I don't know whatever you can find in Amazon or Google Cloud Services. You don't control the network. You are one of the participants, and all of them are in charge of maintaining this database. And also, it's a peer-to-peer network, which means that, as I said, there is no one that controls, and people can join and leave whenever they want to. Okay, so I'm going to go over some key concepts that blockchain have. Again, please don't take them as the source of truth. Go ahead. I challenge you to look for this information. This is just a small intro about the whole blockchain ecosystem. So within the blockchains, users in this database, users need to write data, and to do so, which are those operations, they use transactions. So people send transactions, which are the operations that are going to update the data and the state of this database. Transactions are grouped in blocks, right? And blocks are shared across the network in this peer-to-peer network that we have mentioned, and blocks are linked together. So I've mentioned like a few kind of concepts here. The most important ones is that we are resembling to kind of like a data structure. We have transactions, we have blocks, and blocks are chained together to create the whole database. And that transactions are the operations that users need to send in order to update the data. Then one of the most important, I would say, concepts within blockchains are that they are based on public key cryptography. This means that transactions, whenever you are sending a transaction or whenever any user is sending a transaction, they need to sign those messages. And that provides two important properties. The first one is authentication. So whenever I send a transaction, I'm saying that I'm the one that's performing that action. And also the signatures provide integrity checks, right? So no one can change the transaction that I'm sending. So the operations are secure. And signatures can be used to encode different rules. For example, I could add a rule in this blockchain that I can only spend the tokens that I own, right? I can spend the balance that I own. Basically, we can encode these or more complex rules that can be embedded into the blockchain software. So we could implement a lot of things that that we are going to speak later. Okay. Another key concept are cryptographic hashes. Cryptographic hashes are hashes that are non-reversible, and they are kind of like collision-free. This is between quotes because obviously that's cannot be possible in the world and the representation, but it's extremely unlikely that you can get, given two different inputs, the same hash. And these hashes are super important because they are used to connect blocks using what's called hash pointers. So basically we have transactions. Transactions are embedded into blocks, and blocks are connected amongst each other using these cryptographic hashes. And the interesting thing is that these hashes are used to connect one block to the previous one. And this way, if anyone is willing to change, I don't know, for example, the block 100, after the block has been received by all the different peers in the network, if I'm willing to change that one, even just a single bit, all the blocks that go after it will be considered invalid. That gives backwards integrity because block 1000 can confirm that all the blocks behind it are the ones that we have received, right? And as I said, this is a distributed network, right? This is a decentralized. So we need to agree upon the transaction order. Keep in mind that transaction order, it's not the same receiving funds and then spending them than spending them and then receiving. And as you can see on the right, we have a lot of nodes, and these are just not the people. You need to consider users, and users are competing to use the same database. In that way, we need to find a way to define the transaction order, which is going to define how the state is updated. In that way, consensus is the protocol that all the nodes that conform this network need to follow, and they define the transaction order, which is one of the most important things. You might have heard about them, for example, proof of work or proof of stake, or even proof of authority, which is a little bit more centralized. But in general terms, keep in mind that consensus protocols can be different and they might be suitable for different use cases. And then we have this immutability property. In general terms, this is important to mention, blockchain history cannot be reversed. As I said, cryptographic hashes are used to do so. So basically, if there is a transaction that happened on block 100, it cannot be undone once the blockchain has progressed, and we are in block 1000, right? It's important to mention because that's confusing. Actually, I was confused about this when I started in blockchain ecosystem. That doesn't mean that blockchains cannot evolve. The data cannot evolve. Basically, you can have an amount, a balance, and you can increase your balance. You can receive some funds. You can transfer. The state, the current view of the database can evolve, but all the transactions are kept, and you have an audit trail. And as opposed as many people think that blockchains are kind of like shady, basically it's the complete opposite. You have the whole transaction history written on the blockchain. And the last concept I would like to introduce are smart contracts. Smart contracts are not smart and not contracts. They are programs that are stored in a blockchain. Think of them, if we were saying that blockchains are kind of like databases, a complex database, smart contracts are like stored procedures. Those are programs that are stored in the blockchain, and state changes, and these programs can change the state, right? And these operations that smart contracts perform are validated by the whole network. So everyone that's running the network, it's part of this giant database, can validate that these programs execute as expected. So I'm going to share my mental model of how do I envision like blockchain development. Again, this is my personal view, and you might find something different around the web. But I think it's a very good first step in order to get into this. So what I try to do here is to express it in like different layers, and we will go over each item. And it's important for you to know that you can approach blockchain development on each of these layers. Actually, I started working on a backend system, then I switched to working on a node, then I worked on smart contracts, and then back to backend, I create a wallet. So it doesn't, whatever you start doesn't define it, okay? Sometimes it's just starting from wherever you feel comfortable with the tools that you feel comfortable with, and then start learning and moving across different layers. And I also wanted to add on the right some other stuff that is not technically development-wise, it's more related to research, but it's super important for you to know that they exist, okay? So let's start with the first one, nodes. So as we have been discussing in a few slides before, we are in a peer-to-peer network, right? So we need nodes to connect to each other and start sharing information and agree upon which is the database that we need to keep, right? That piece of software, it's usually named the node, right? It's a piece of software, a binary that's run on different machines, and they run a peer-to-peer protocol to connect within each other and to share messages to start importing and working with the database. These nodes are the ones that store the blockchain, right? That kind of like, it's between quotes because you might decide what to do with your nodes, but in general terms, they are the ones that run the whole consensus algorithm to agree upon each other. And they also usually provide an API. This API allows you to get access to the data that's stored in the node. One thing that's super interesting and that I found when I started back then is that most of the time, these nodes are protocol oriented, which means that you might have different implementations in different languages working on the same network. And that's actually where most value comes from, right? Having a client written in Java and another one written in Rust, and they can communicate each other, share the information, and keep this decentralized database. Key challenge is when you're going to approach this kind of development, right? So first of all, networking. It's super low level sometimes, and you need to share messages across different nodes that might be even distributed on the other side of the world. So you need to deal with latencies and with messages that can be dropped. You need to retry. You might be getting information from one node that actually that information might be old or might be different from what other processes are seeing, and that's consensus, right? Trying to get a common prefix, a common blockchain that everyone is following. And another aspect that's super challenging when working on this piece of software is efficiency. What happens is that if you are running in if you are working in a network and you are running a node which is extremely performant and you have another node which isn't, the most performant one might get some advantages. For example, it might get data first and you can see the information flowing faster than the others. And that's something that you usually don't want. So it's super important to work on a it's super important to have like a super performant code. And the last item is related to virtual machines. Sometimes smart contracts are not like native pieces of software. They are compiled to a virtual machine that runs these operations. For example, if you work with Ethereum or many others, they have a specific virtual machine that runs these programs. And the last key challenge here is, okay, we are in a distributed system. What happens if you are coding a node that it's not following the rules? If there is a bug, basically your node is going to follow, it's going to be disconnected or it's going to not progress in the time, right? So it's super important to work with others and other protocols. And what we put here are some interesting implementations for you to check. For example, we have the Ethereum Get, which is the Go implementation. This client, it's not just using Ethereum, but many other projects use it. So I would say it's the most used one. Another one which is super interesting is Cardano, which is written in Haskell, and it's correct by construction. So Cardano has a specific way of doing stuff, like developing stuff, where are focused on delivering high quality software, right? So they use Haskell and different construction methods to get proper, like correct software. Then I put Mantis because it's the one that I work with. So if you have any questions about this presentation, you can ping me and we can chat about it. But you can have nodes written in Rust. Actually, one of the most widely used in Ethereum was written in Rust. You have Java, for example, Rootstock one, and many, many more. What I could say, though, is that most of the nodes are written in languages that first have really good tooling, and second, they have some type safeties properties, right? I haven't seen many nodes written, for example, in JavaScript. I'm not saying there are any, but most of them are written in these languages that I've shared. All right, so smart contracts. As I said, some blockchains allow you to upload some code. These programs are executed by sending transactions. Remember, transactions are the operations that you send to these networks so you can get things progress and and change the state. Programs can or can't modify the state. You can encode rules as you please. And the most interesting part is that the result of this program execution is validated among different peers, right? So you can verify if you are part of the network that this program has done whatever it has stated to do, right? And the key challenges working with smart contracts are that bugs can be catastrophic. And so testing should be the first thing you do. I mean, you should do that usually, but with smart contracts, you should pay way much more attention to it. Sometimes or most of the time, smart contracts deal with value, with money, and if there is a bug there, everything might get lost, right? So it's super important for you to take care of proper testing. Then the programming languages that are used to write smart contracts most of the time look really familiar. I'm going to show you an example, but they have like a different mindset, which means that even if they might resemble to C or JavaScript or even Java, in the end, you need to learn some stuff that will help you coding the smart contracts. For example, most of them are single-threaded, so you won't be dealing with concurrency issues, at least in the form that you know. But there are other things that you need to take care of if you don't want to if you don't want to introduce any bugs. And sometimes you need to understand how it works in a low-level approach, right? For example, if you are dealing with Java, I would say like 80 or 90% of the time, you don't care how the garbage collector works. Obviously, if you are working in some specific application, that's super important. But specifically for smart contracts, which we have said that the transactions are validated within the whole network, that has a price. And sometimes you need to understand how the virtual machine works in order to optimize the execution cost. So that's different. The bugs can be catastrophic and needing to understand low-level low-level understanding of how the virtual machine works is something that might be a little bit overwhelming. It's still a little bit to me today, but it's super interesting and it's super funny as well. In terms of languages, there are so many that I wasn't able to list them. But the most widely used one is Solidity, which is a language that has been introduced for Ethereum, and many chains that came after it are using the same virtual machine to run smart contract, which means the same kind of languages, right? So I wanted to show this quick example. I took it from a library written by some Argentinian geniuses named OpenZeppelin. And this is basically a token. It's not important, but it's one of the most widely used contracts in the world, and it might be holding or it might be managing billions of dollars. And what I wanted to show you in this snippet is that this is how a smart contract looks like, right? You have something which resembles to a class. You have you can inherit from different other implementations. You have state or variables that can store some data. You have a constructor like Java, right, where you can set up some values when you are creating this instance. You can read the state that you have in your contract, and you can perform some operations, right? You can return some values. You have visibility. Something could be public, external, private, internal, whatever. So the main purpose of showing this snippet is for you to understand that this is kind of like what you might likely be doing today, with some things that you need to learn, okay? And then we have the indexers and backend layer. Okay, so if you remember the layers that I showed, we have the node, we have the smart contracts, and on top of the stack, we have the UI, that what people is going to use. And that UI needs to get data from the blockchain to do some operations, like reading the balance or even seeing historical data, right? And most of the time, what we need is a backend. It's important for me to mention that this is not quite Web3, because Web3 tries to get rid of backends, at least from centralized entities. Actually, there are some projects that work on this, like the Graph. But many other networks or even projects cannot rely upon this, right? For example, sometimes you need to do some complex statistics, and you need to read the blockchain and do some calculations and show them in a really good looking chart to the users. So sometimes you need to have a backend, right? It could be open source. You can let people to run it on their own, but sometimes you just cannot escape from this. And sometimes you can add some logic on top of these backends, like for example, alerts or fiat payments. Fiat is like non-cryptocurrencies, like being able to accept payments in USD dollars. So sometimes you need a backend logic to integrate your application. What are the key challenges here? Well, blockchain processing is not trivial, not at all. Again, you need to connect to your node and then start receiving data, and the data can change as the blockchain moves forward. You need to model data in a meaningful way, both in the smart contract, but also in your application, to be able to perform statistics. And one thing that's super important and that was also hard to grasp at the beginning, transactions in a blockchain, most of the time, I would say 99% cannot be reversed, right? So if you send a transaction is settled. And what happens is that credit card payments can, right? So you need to be careful with dealing with, for example, payments or other integrations, and you need to consider all the constraints that blockchain-based systems provide. Languages that you can work on these indexers or backends, almost anything, wherever you're using now, might apply, like JavaScript, TypeScript, Java, Python, Haskell, Rust, whatever you can imagine. Obviously, you need to add some frameworks on top of this that will help you connecting to the blockchain. But in general terms, you can have, like, I don't know, a Java Spring application that exposes data after getting that data from the blockchain. And that data is indexed in a traditional database, like a Postgres DB. Apps, okay. So blockchains need to be clicked, right? I mean, you could have a really good looking smart contract, super secure, that performs something super interesting, but in the end, users need to use, right? Need to connect to these blockchains. And the key challenges here are the most important ones that I think about is thinking about the users, right? You might be a crypto expert and you might know to even do some weird workflows, but some people isn't, right? And actually, this is about inclusion. So you need to understand how to provide and create secure and easy to use experiences, right? Languages, whatever you're using now to do front-end might work. I'll show you a snippet in React, but you can do whatever you're using now. It could be a web, it could be a mobile app, it could be a desktop app. It's up to you, right? And there is a lot of UX work to be done in this domain, right? As I said, it's super important to let the users understand how this works without teaching them all the internals, right? So it's super important to create easy to grasp user experiences. For example, this snippet, which is super basic, and I just copy pasted from Use Wallet repository. This snippet shows how to connect to a wallet and get the account balance. As you can see here, this is standard React front-end code where you can connect to different wallets, different providers, and you can read the account ID and the balance, right? So if you're into UX or front-end development, even if you're just a UX designer that doesn't do any code, you are not an engineer, there is a lot of work that can be done on blockchain space and needs to be done. What else you can do? And this is something special, but I wanted to include as well. So if you are into logic and math, formal verification, and we are actually doing that already. You could prove some properties of your smart contracts, your programs, protocols using formal verification. Then, if you like research, you can write and review protocols. Protocols can be from networking protocols to app protocols to economic protocols. And that's the next item, which is related to economy and game theory. So if you like economy, game theory, and such things, and you're not even a programmer, blockchains are based on incentives. Besides the apps that are most of them are economy-based ones, blockchains are based on incentives, right? And if you like DevOps and you like running software and infrastructure, nodes need to be deployed and maintained, right? So there is a lot of work to do on that regard. And actually, this is a kind of like a screenshot of a paper where Javi, which is one of our guys, worked on formally verifying a stable one, right? So you can see that this is a paper, formal paper, traditional one. And if you are into like deep math stuff, you can work on this. Okay, let's debunk some myth, okay? Blockchains are not cryptocurrencies, okay? I mean, they are a really, really good fit because the first blockchain ever known, which is Bitcoin, was designed to transfer some value between different users. You can use the same technology to do traceability, anti-counterfeit, decentralized identities, intellectual property, document notarization, and gaming. And all the cases that I named are cases that we have worked with. Okay, so this is not something that I took from our website. We have production apps actually doing these kind of things using blockchains. Blockchains don't add value by themselves. This means that if you have a project and it looks interesting, it's not just saying, okay, let's use a blockchain, right? Sometimes blockchains are not a good fit and it requires training to understand where you can use blockchains and where it's not worth using them, right? Because blockchains are these interesting database, but they add a lot of complexity to the systems, like both in development, security, for example, audits, and then operational costs. Running a blockchain requires you running a node, being sure that it's working properly, etc. So this is super important. It's not about thinking something and then adding a blockchain on top of it. It's trying to understand where blockchains add value. Decentralization is not Boolean. So this is kind of like a controversial comment. It's super important that decentralized blockchains. So decentralization is not something like something is decentralized and something else is not decentralized. You have it's a scale, right? Obviously, whenever it's most decentralized, it's more interesting. You have more challenges, but sometimes you don't need that, right? And it's fine. And also, blockchains don't need to be public. Sometimes you want to have a public ledger like Bitcoin, Ethereum, but sometimes you just need a blockchain that's public to the interested parties. Think about 3 companies that are sharing some information amongst each other and they don't trust to each other, right? So maybe it's just running a blockchain that's controlled by all of them, right? So where to start? Okay, so first of all, what I would suggest is to try to identify whatever you are doing now or whatever it's most exciting to you, and try to start over there. Remember, you have something starting from UX, front-end development, back-end development, smart contracts, and even low level, and even something crazier like economics and math, right? Another thing that is super important is whatever you do first, it won't define you. So you can start as a backend developer, and then you might switch to write the smart contracts. Then you can go to touch something in a protocol level, and then you can go to the front end, right? It's up to you to decide. Super important. I mean, you need to read a lot, and internet is full of the information. But what's most important is to read. To build, right? So build, and build. Look for examples, look for use cases, even if they are simple or might sound stupid for you, just go there. Look for projects and do proof of concept. They don't need to be bulletproof, they don't need to be production ready. Just deal with it. You need to do this mindset change, right? So building is the best way to do it. And of course, we're always hiring, so you can reach us and we're always growing, okay? So I have some questions here that you have shared. The first one is, what programming languages do you consider indispensable to start as a blockchain engineer? Okay, so as I said, it depends on what you're looking for. So if you're looking to work on a backend, as I said, wherever you want to, Java, Python, JavaScript, it's fine. If you are willing to work on smart contracts, I would suggest you to take a look at Solidity, which is the most widely spread. You can find tons of documentation all around. But again, don't concentrate on a specific language. Just use whatever you know at the moment and start working on it. Okay, and then you can learn wherever it's required along as you go. What are real applications beyond any DeFi applications? Okay, so for example, let me give you just one that's super interesting to me. We are working on a platform that handles decentralized identities for students in an African country. Basically, students can own the certificates that they keep achieving during their school lifetime, and they in the future can build their identity so they, for example, can apply for a job, right? That's not DeFi. There is no value transfer involved, and it's super interesting. Yeah, that's a non-DeFi use case. I would like to ask about issue of scalability, fees paid to make the transaction of the apps. Which are the strategies or methods to use to solve this problem? Okay, so as we said, or you might have noticed, blockchains are, whenever they are public, consider a public database that's being shared across the whole world, right? So a lot of people is willing to read and access and write the same database that you have, right? That you want to. So whenever something it's required, the price to write on that blockchain goes up, right? So in order to tackle this, there are tons of different alternatives that are being discussed at the moment. The most widely used ones are, I don't know, use a different blockchain, right? Instead of using Ethereum, which is kind of like the most widely used, for example, which supports Solidity and smart contracts, use Matic, which is another blockchain. And you can move assets whenever you want to between them using some pieces of software that are called bridges. There are also different solutions that are working, like in a technological point of view, to build smart contracts, to build platforms that will run on top of Ethereum using the same security properties that Ethereum, which is what you might have heard about layer 2 solutions. Or even look for a different platform, right? Maybe you don't need to use Ethereum. You might be happy using Tezos or Cardano or I don't know, whatever, right? So, but in the end, we can get faster blockchains in terms of, or more performant blockchains. But in the end, if tons of people are using it, then you need to compete with others. So, yeah, okay, so this question is, what do you mean by blockchain transactions cannot be reverted 99% of the time? What I'm saying, maybe that got misunderstood. A transaction that's deep enough in the blockchain cannot be reverted, but that's a probability most of the time. For example, let's discuss about Bitcoin, right? So blockchains are linked to each other, and there are some, and remember that this chain that's being built along the time, it's something that we agree upon, right? So what happens is that as they are distributed system, when we approach to the newest transaction, that those transactions, those blocks can be reorganized, right? So you might have seen a transaction that you say, okay, this has been included into the blockchain, but then that block gets reverted. Why? Because I'm a single node and the rest of the network has accepted a different block in that position, right? That's what I mean about transactions being reverted, and that's what you might have heard of when you are transactioning, let's say with Bitcoin, just wait for 6 blocks confirmation, right? It's about getting your transaction deep enough into the blockchain so that won't be reverted. Obviously, that's the case of Bitcoin. It depends on the consensus algorithm and the different technologies. Which blockers do you find nowadays? Which pain points? Okay, so to be honest, I don't find many pain points. I remember when I started, I was using a wallet name. I cannot remember the name, but actually the frameworks and the tooling was super painful, right? Working with smart contracts was super slow and hard to grasp. Now we have excellent tools that help you working with this. Like, for example, my ideal stack dealing with Ethereum-based or EVM-based blockchains is RHAB, which you can write tests using TypeScript. It's super, super easy to work with. You can launch your own blockchain locally to test whatever you're using. Then there is another library that helps you integrating your app in the front end, which is named Ethers. It's super easy to work with those tools as compared with what happened like 5 years ago, which was not as pleasant as nowadays. Obviously, again, the pain points are security. I mean, I'm not saying I get stressed, but it requires a lot of concentration, at least to me, to write smart contracts. Whenever I sit down and start writing Solidity, it's like, okay, I need to be super connected with that on what I'm writing because I don't want to make any mistake. Obviously, there are processes where, as usual, like peer reviews, and then you can hire a code auditor. But in the end, when you are writing, you need to be super careful. Okay. How does blockchain work with energy-oriented applications? So, for example, I'm not sure if you are speaking about energy industry, which I'm going to explain just a little bit about this, but you could build traceability solutions on top of blockchains that help you with energy industry, like tracing fuel going around the pipes, for example. That's something that we have explored in the past. What are the most required profiles required in your company? What proficiency levels are currently in scope for the open? So we need everyone, right? We need from front-end developers, UX, UI, smart contracts, tons of things, right? And in terms of proficiency levels, what we require, at least, let's say for smart contracts, we need someone that can write smart contracts at the moment, even basic ones, right? And we have an onboarding and a challenge that you need to do before joining that will help us assessing where you are in terms of your seniority. But yeah, I mean, for backend, you need to be fluent in any traditional backend system, right? And we can train you to understand the blockchain caveats. Could you delve into the concept that contracts need to be clicked? Yes, so that's kind of like maybe it sounds better in Spanish than in English, But what I was trying to say is that when you code smart contracts or you code blockchains or whatever apps you're making that interact with the blockchain, sometimes you have automated processes that work for you and it's fine, like a trading bot. But sometimes you need people to perform actions like exchanging some tokens or to upload a document that will be timestamped in the blockchain. And in the end, I would say most of 80% of the time, you need to interact with the blockchains from a GUI, right? So it's super important to also have people in your team that knows how to develop front-end experiences that are pleasing to the users, right? Sometimes you can create the most amazing smart contract, and whenever you show that to the people that's going to use it, they just don't know how to use a wallet, right? So they are saying, what am I seeing? And you have different patterns that happen when you're dealing with blockchains. Transactions are most of the time not instant, so you need to wait and you need to show some information to the users. So that's what I meant about blockchains need to be clicked. So very recently, PayPal finally announced the adoption of Bitcoin in its platform. Do you see a possibility for traditional financial institutions, banks adopting cryptos in the future? Well, yes, I think that there is a lot of value going over there, and they are going to miss tons of opportunities. Actually, there is a really, really nice app in Argentina named Lemon, or that you can just deposit funds using your bank account into their application. You can buy cryptocurrencies and they then pay using a credit card that they issue, right? So there are tons of use cases for financial services that they will eventually need to provide. Or otherwise, that's something that someone else is going to take. That's what I think. Would you please mention topics, technologies, or thoughts to read about blockchain interoperability? Okay, so the term that I would suggest you to look for on Google is bridges. There are tons of them that will help you moving assets from one blockchain to the other. There are different flavors. You have centralized bridges where someone is running this bridge and you lock some coins, some tokens, and they will release some others on the other chain. Or you could just have more decentralized protocols that run the whole thing for you. Okay, so I think we don't have any more questions. So thank you for your time. You can contact me over Twitter. That's my handle. My DMs are open. So if you have any question, please just write me. Now we're going to switch to the next meeting where we are going to speak with Santiago C. So I'll introduce him in a few minutes. Thank you. Hey everybody, welcome back. So I'm with Santi City. I'm going to read his video because it's quite outstanding. He's the founder and president of Democracy Earth Foundation, a nonprofit organization backed by Y Combinator that builds universal basic income on Ethereum and proof of humanity protocol. He's the executive director of DAO Education and author of Hacktivism. So welcome, Santi.
Thank you for having me.
You are quite busy these days, right? It's been a busy weekend, I would say. So would you mind sharing what has happened?
Yes, well, it's one of those rare occasions where Vitalik Buterin, the creator of Ethereum, is visiting our country, or my country, Argentina. And it's a real honor to have someone like him, learning about Argentina, about how its society works, how its currency works. And I flew here just to help him out a little bit with his agenda. And it's been a couple of a bit of a roller coaster since I arrived to Argentina, but it's been amazing to get to see the whole technology scene, the crypto scene, coming together to welcome one of the greatest innovators in technology of the last few years.
Well, and actually, I read over Twitter that he mentioned that one of the protocols that he's more interested about is proof of humanity, which you have worked with, right? And you have one of the co-founders. So would you mind telling us about that protocol and what does it do?
Yes, actually, like Vitalik is helping me understand things about proof of humanity that I haven't thought about myself, which is getting his kind of insight and input is really interesting. And something that he told me that was really surprising. So proof of humanity is a protocol on decentralized identity, how we can use Ethereum to create a registry of human beings without duplicates, without robots, that is civil resistant, meaning that no one can tamper with the registry of identities in a decentralized way. So Vitalik, actually, he was very kind to say that proof of humanity is one of the projects he's most interested on. But one of the reasons is because it enables a new way of onboarding people to cryptocurrency. Historically, unless you were mining, and which is something that a lot of people actually do, but it's a bit of a technical hassle for the vast majority. The only way of onboarding yourself to crypto has been through the use of exchanges and like somehow organizations that are still tied to the legacy banking system. And with proof of humanity, it's something that gives people an identity and some crypto to get started right from the get-go without relying on the traditional banking system. And with the UBI token, which is this smart contract that tries to deliver universal basic income, provide a mechanism that helps people get access to their first crypto, and through that to start interacting with the greater Ethereum and crypto ecosystem. And that has been like quite an epiphany for me, because obviously we see a lot of potential use cases for decentralized identity. Universal basic income is one of those use cases. Another one is democracy, all kinds of ways of doing financing and credit. NFT games could benefit from this, like applications, probably many that we don't even imagine just yet. But identity is a very important part of the puzzle. There's something that Edward Snowden says that I like a lot. That is, identity is the one vulnerability being exploited across all systems. It's kind of like the mother of all battles. And it's interesting, Ethereum enables thinking identity under this new light. And because of the economic nature of this type of network, when we think about social applications on this, they're not just about social media or transforming the information layer. It's really about social welfare potentially, and about transforming the economic lives of people. So it's very has been a few very exciting days. It's an honor to have Vitalik willing to discover the Argentine ecosystem. There's a lot of talent here that has been actively contributing to the success of Ethereum over the last years. And I think there's also here a more widespread adoption. I am noticing this myself, since I actually live in Madrid and I haven't been in Argentina in 2 years. Now I'm here, and I'm like, everyone is mining. Even the guy that drove me here is mining. That's how you bootstrap these ideas and these networks.
And actually, I want to like dissect what you have said, because you said a lot of concepts within a sentence, right? So one thing that I would like, if you could elaborate, it's about blockchains for good, right? Because sometimes we have heard about, I don't know, using blockchain to trade and do stuff, but universal basic income, UB, is some kind of like different. It's a cryptocurrency, but it's not just about trading, right?
Yeah, like everything, it's an experiment, and what it's exciting, at least what I find, like, okay, we're kind of proving something. For instance, is the fact that you can do identity over these networks. You can provide a source of income that will be the same for everyone, regardless of where you were born. historically, when we think about any kind of welfare system or universal basic income, we tend to think about it in terms of the government providing this through coercion, through the money obtained over taxes, kind of funding some kind of welfare system that impacts people. And maybe some governments are able to do this successfully, but the problem is that the only benefitors of that kind of help will be those who were lucky enough to be born in that country or in that government. The exciting thing about thinking about a crypto UBI is the fact that someone in Mumbai can obtain the same value as someone in Connecticut or Los Angeles. So it's a level playing field network. And I think that, obviously still Ethereum is in its very early days. It's like the Atari years for crypto. There's still more future than past for sure. But if we look at the picture and rather than the snapshot, I think that the potential for scaling technologies that are able to provide UBI to everyone in a permissionless way through decentralized networks that are censorship resistant, it's a much more interesting world than probably some of the legacy ideas that we see in traditional politics, because of this possibility of actually reaching everyone and leveling up the playing field for everyone, because this is not bounded to any specific jurisdiction or to any specific government or institution that has the troubles of the past in its legacy. This is an entirely new alternative that can make the existing model obsolete. And Ethereum is particularly fertile in developing nations. Like in Proof of Humanity, a lot of the users are from India, from China, from Argentina, from Brazil, from Mexico, nations that they have nothing to lose when they adopt these kind of technologies. And it's exciting to see the pace of innovation also emerging from these countries.
Well, actually, that's something that I got impressed about. I mean, I was following the development process when you were posting some screenshots over Twitter. And one thing that actually amazed me is that the community that got built around Proof of Humanity, right? I was trying to get one of my friends on board that he was looking for UBI, and the amount of documentation, the people helping to vouch you is one of the processes we're going to do. So what can you tell us? Is that one of the reasons why you picked Ethereum?
Yes, I mean, we all know about the wonders of open source software development and the coordination capacity of decentralized networks. At least, we're into these networks, we know it a little bit in theory, a little bit in practice. But I have to say that throughout the process of launching Proof of Humanity and UBI, this fact actually caught me by surprise, and it has been overwhelming to see how suddenly a community takes over the project and parallelizes experiments, parallelizes innovation capacity, because I am used to the startup mindset. I've been part of a couple of startups, always in the technology world, and obviously you have the basic 101 playbook for that is you hire a very talented team that thinks out a good product, you launch, you hope for product market fit, and then you have to figure out the next great thing, right? If you have figured out the first one in the first place, which rarely happens. And with UBI, obviously, it was a joint effort between Democracy Earth Foundation and Kleros, which is a cooperative that has been building arbitration systems on Ethereum, a group of very smart folks. And we worked on Proof of Humanity and UBI. It got launched in March this year. And right from the get-go, the community started building coordination efforts, like Telegram channels that were crowd vouching for other new members to participate in the Proof of Humanity registry, the Rolling Funds group that was trying to crowdfund the profiles that didn't have enough money. There's a bunch of DAOs happening right now that are getting people to go to the villages and towns where this could be more impactful. Suddenly, like the team that was working on the idea originally, like I felt this pressure. Well, I need to, what do I code next? What do I build next? But eventually started happening that ideas suddenly emerge from anywhere. And it wasn't just about the idea, it was about the finished prototype that actually implemented like the basic notion or some execution of that idea. And this has been going throughout the whole year since we launched Proof of Humanity, an amazing community that has a real stake in the future of UBI and Proof of Humanity. We have a DAO where people democratically make choices that impact changes in the protocol and how the community works. It's a democratic DAO because we can actually do one person, one vote with Proof of Humanity. And seeing all this actually being played out, actually working, actually making decisions, actually enforcing those changes, and seeing how these changes improve the quality, the experience for the users, and as a coordinated effort built purely through means of smart contracts, nothing else. Was a very interesting process, and yeah, it certainly feels different like a traditional centralized startup when you build things this way, and the capacity of coordination is surprisingly, universal and global.
Awesome. And speaking of smart contracts, right? You're also a builder, right? As we say in the ecosystem. So you have coded this smart contracts. And one question that was asked in the previous call was about what are the pain points, right? So you have experience, you have done the work already. What were the pain points, or what do you feel about the development ecosystem experience?
Look, smart contract development is a dangerous game. I think that it's good to have certain experience before jumping straight into Solidity. I mean, every hacker is a tinkerer, and you should always be willing to pursue your own curiosity and go for it. Try every technology, right? But in my experience with Solidity and smart contract development, a couple of things are noteworthy of like very relevant good practices, which are also good practices in the web world or in the traditional client server architecture, but are not as critical. One is test-driven development, TDD, test, test, test. Like writing the tests is probably the vast majority of the code you will end up writing rather than the smart contract code itself. Actually, my recommendation for smart contract development, try to make it as small as possible, as succinct as possible in lines of code. Eventually, if you need to optimize the code, you might need to introduce some redundancy here and there to save gas for users. But initially, a smart contract shouldn't be more than 100 lines or 200 lines. Depends obviously on what the system is trying to achieve. But the vast majority of lines will be the tests that try to explore different use cases, different scenarios, different exploits that could be used in the smart contract. So you spend a lot of time like thinking in an adversarial mindset and trying to break your own code. I was lucky enough to work with a great team of auditors that came from the Kleros camp. I suddenly woke up one day and I had like 3 Google Doc links that were even auditing the white space between my words in the comments. And like if there were 2 spaces that was needed to be edited. And I like that kind of like rigorous attention to detail, because you're dealing with bits here. Like simply how the order of instructions happen on a smart contract can be the difference between a reentrancy attack or not. So it's a very delicate substance. Then you obviously then you work on a test net and you use it with you punch the contract on a test net, trying to see how it works and how it operates again with your expectations. And then the day of truth emerges when you deploy to mainnet, and there's no way back. It's a very stressful thing, immutability. But it's what gives so much value to these networks. We love Ethereum, and we believe it's so much better than everything else because of this property that history cannot be changed thanks to immutability. And it's the very energy that helps build legitimacy. Legitimacy is extremely important when you have to make risky decisions or difficult decisions. And the fact that we can create this kind of substance with this kind of way of networking and building software, it's mind-blowing, because then you see the impact in people's lives. To me, the most emotional moments with the project has been some of the stories that I heard from some of the users, like people that were able to afford buying plane tickets to meet with their parents after 2 years of the pandemic, or people that were able to afford their student debt, and a lot of more personal stories where you start saying, wow, this is it's putting some cash in people's pockets, and in some cases really makes a difference. And wow, wouldn't it be amazing if crypto could do this for everyone on the planet? Wouldn't that be like the best possible thing ever? I mean, we have meme coins and jokes going on here and there. Dogecoin is kind of silly, but kind of interesting at the same time. You have like a bunch of millennials coordinating to save GameStop, and going after a bunch of sharks in Wall Street, and we all applaud the millennials. Okay, these are nice prototypes of what crypto can how crypto can coordinate value, coordinate capital. What if we don't try to figure out a way of crypto coordinating capital in a way where no one gets left behind? No one gets left behind. Of course, we're probably a very far away from there, getting chances that this won't happen overnight. But boy, I know what happened with the internet in the last 30 years. I know what happened with computers in the last 40, 50 years. If the same thing happens with this type of network, we're looking at a very different world. And I believe in being optimistic. I think it's a healthy thing. It's not easy sometimes, especially the older you get. But when I hear to folks like Vitalik and many that are coming after him, even younger, like leapfrogging, our generations in benefit for some of these ideas, I think it makes plenty of sense. And that's what's exciting of building on the Web3 or crypto scene.
And something that came to me, it's like, okay, you said that this is kind of like it's not a proof of concept, because it's actually, I think I read that people is getting more than like that they would than like a minimum like retirement, like, so it's kind of like, it's a lot of money, right? And actually, if you would like to comment just for a minute, there was an event that pumped the UBI price, right? I think it's worth mentioning what happened there.
So when Vitalik entered the show.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, being endorsed by the creator of Ethereum, it's not something that you could, I mean, most people could claim, right?
To be honest with you, not even in my wildest dreams. I'm a big fan of Vitalik, as I've been a big fan of a lot of great programmers. I think we're talking about a guy that's probably gonna be, he's 27 years old, on the same stature of Alan Turing, or many great ones that we could mention. And the thing that Vitalik did that was surprising to me, because I found out that on the next day, was that he suddenly one day acquired almost all of the circulating supply of UBI available on Uniswap, around 2 million UBI, and he burned them. Like, he burned the whole thing. But what's more interesting is like a bit of the background of that. He got a lot of donations from Dogecoins, which are these meme coins that try to coordinate a lot of capital and generate pumping games, very speculative stuff. And one of these Dogecoins donated like $1 billion worth of this SHIB token to Vitalik. And Vitalik used that capital. It was like a community saying, okay, Vitalik, in appreciation for everything you've done for Ethereum, you have this, do whatever you want with it. And he used that coordinated capital through a meme of a little dog, sheepdog. I don't know how this happens. To be honest, it's surprising for everyone, but probably Elon Musk's joking around with Dogecoin influenced, like the whole dog coordination mechanism. It's cyberspace, is a bit weird. But then Vitalik chose to use that, to buy all of the circulating supply of UBI and burn it. And that led to a nice spike on the price of the token. And then obviously pump and dump, it's always like that. But what's important is that it went to a higher band than the band where the token was moving before. Like, it led to higher liquidity, it led to more transactions, it led to a record day of almost $40 million worth of UBI transacted in one single day. So it led to higher activity, higher legitimization of the protocol. It led to other teams like Optimism using a percentage of fees to burn UBI. It led to a lot of NFT games that are making play to earn schemes, where by playing the game you will be burning UBI, thus making your gaming time less frivolous and hopefully more impactful in society. Like, we can think that way now, which is actually Vitalik's recommendation. Let's build syncing mechanisms for the UBI token. And actually then he kept on buying UBI. Like, he's still buying, and now he's hoarding. He's probably one of the largest whales of UBI. Someone tweeted the other day, Vitalik has 81 years worth of UBI. I find that like great. Now he will be able to participate in the governance of the protocol. He actually has already influenced decisions on the chat, or by sharing some of his thoughts. It's very generous of him that he's still actively playing this incredible orchestra in many ways. That's this whole legion of hackers and programmers from all around the world that are thinking the future of democracy, the future of identity, in many different ways, and in a coordinated way. And in many aspects, I think cooperation is way more abundant than any form of competition.
Okay, and you have mentioned already that Ethereum provided you like community, it provided you access to tons of people that otherwise you wouldn't. But do you regret about picking Ethereum somehow, at least, or would you do anything differently? Because nowadays, I mean, registering it's not easy.
Look, we computer folks inherited from the car or the automotive nerds the need of optimization based on variables like transactions per second, right? One of the pain points of Ethereum is that it has so much demand right now that its gas is expensive on the mainnet. So thinking about a layer 2 or a roll-up strategy is critical. But there's another thing that I discovered building with Ethereum, which is another way of thinking about these resources that's pretty relevant also. And that's two things. One is composability. When you build with Ethereum, you have access in a permissionless way. These are not servers where you have to ask for permission with API keys. This is completely permissionless. You can hit any other smart contract and build up your own system leveraging any of those thousands and thousands, if not probably more than a couple of million of smart contracts deployed on the mainnet. So the composability aspect, like if I look at the code of UBI interplays with Proof of Humanity, UBI interplays with Uniswap with a liquidity farming program, UBI interplays with Kleros as it's used for the arbitration of the identities, or Kleros uses the governor of, it's used to arbitrate decisions of the DAO. It interplays with Snapshot where we do the votes. Like, this interoperability that happens in the ecosystem is really important. And the other aspect is liquidity. Some of these resources are also incredibly liquid to the point that they have more money than the central bank of my country, of our country, of many countries in the world, maybe many countries combined. Probably, someone could build that sensationalist metric, but it's a fact. There's $100 billion in locked up capital in Ethereum smart contracts right now. And so one of the first things that emerged from the community, someone said you should do like an endowment model for UBI, where you have an investment fund that deploys capital and generates a interest of 10%, and you use that interest money to burn UBI. You don't burn it with the capital generating the interest. And that's how actually universities, Ivy League universities work, like Harvard and Princeton and Stanford. They all have big investment funds, and with the interest that these funds generate every year, with that 10%, they fund the activity of the university. So if I were to deploy that or to make something like that in the legacy world, probably I have to be a Harvard graduate myself and know absolutely everyone and get to have the right friends in the Democrat and in the Republican Party in order to deploy something that could allow me to get even remotely closely to an endowment model like that. In Ethereum, I can do that in 3 weeks. I can talk to a developer that knows about Wirearn, which is a protocol that lends cryptocurrency. It generates a yield. Usually that yield is averaging 10% in US dollars a year. And with a smart contract, I could use that yield to automatically buy UBI tokens on Uniswap and burn them. And suddenly, out of nowhere, because of this community, Emiliano Bonassi, a contributor to Wirearn, built this. And I only had to work on the user interface. And suddenly we had like the vaults. And when Vitalik did his big burn, the vaults went 100%. And we had all of the vaults, being with a lot of Ether being lended and generating a big enough yield that can burn significant amount of UBI if we ever need to, the community wants to make that. So the knowledge and the influence required to deploy one thing in the legacy world and this other thing in smart contract world, the discussion is over. There's no point even arguing, Mr. Big Banker, like game over.
Well, actually, first of all, I'm glad that you mentioned the Emiliano case, that use case, because it's my favorite one. But I have a question we have 3 more minutes, but I have a question which is super linked to what you have just said. Do you think DeFi will replace traditional finance anytime in the future? How many years do you think DeFi needs to be mass adopted?
I think DeFi might coexist with traditional finance. A lot of banks, depends on how regulation evolves in different countries. For instance, what El Salvador is doing by allowing the legalization of Bitcoin, suddenly a lot of DeFi companies are looking into incorporating there, and maybe a new kind of hybrid institution that has some connection to the state and can interplay well with crypto might emerge. I don't know if I'm not of the sensation that it's going to be a zero-sum outcome where it's either the past or the future. Usually we also have to be respectful of the lessons of the past, of the blood, sweat, and tears that these institutions have behind them. It's important that when you build these kinds of systems, you are aware that every single step in the code you push has political consequences, has social consequences, has economic consequences. And it's a work that must be addressed with a lot of responsibility. We have to also learn from the big dreams that existed in the past that eventually ended up being captured one way or another. And there's no reason to believe this could not happen again. But what I do feel right now is that behind every protocol, behind every cool technology, behind every smart white paper out there, to me, the secret sauce behind all of this, at the end of the day, is the people. When you meet the community, when you meet, you build relationships, you get to make friends, you get to see people that are inspiring, that are dreaming, that are fighting, that are betting their whole life into some of these ideals. And I found those amazing communities throughout my career in different areas. I'm very positive, like Ethereum, one of the best things it has is the community, and that's also something like the human element that is very important not to forget about when we build technology for humans.
Okay, so I have 2 more questions, since one is linked to what you have just said. I know the answer already, kind of, but I would like you to reinforce it. So it says, proof of humanity is running, the technology is here, but in order to truly scale, the protocols and governance systems are still needed, like the permission from nation states, right? How many mass adoption can be achieved? So what do you think about traditional nation states getting involved into this?
I mean, governments and political leaders can adopt this as much as anyone else, or can try to, in some countries, they're maybe even willing to pass a law against the law of gravity, but gravity will still be around. And my sensation with crypto in general is that it's a little bit like the ocean. You cannot draw frontiers in the middle of the ocean. You can build ports. You can build ports, customs, where are choke points where you probably try to get some kind of tax. But what happens in the ocean is a bit of a free area. And in cryptography, the fact that you can transact with someone else in a permissionless way, the fact that a whole wave of zero knowledge technologies will emerge, which are a new technique that improves the privacy layer of these networks. Those are simply an emergent reality, and governments, the responsibility is to adapt to that new reality. The wisest governments will be the ones that know how to use this in their benefit, in the benefit of the citizens. And I think at the end of the day, the bottom line, it's not up to the governments or to the leader right now in that particular moment in time, but it's up to the citizens themselves to start embracing and using this stuff. I think that eventually we will see a generational change in governments, where when, like in the telecommunications industry, the digital bit exists, a concept from Claude Shannon that was in a paper from 1948, and bits did not enter the mainstream until the mid 80s, early 90s, when the internet happened. Well, digital communication, it took, I don't know, 50 years to happen, because one generation died and the next one took over. And in the world of institutional governance in general, when the next generation takes over, I'm pretty sure we will see more and more smart contracts in between us.
Okay, so I have the final question. It's kind of like a must ask for you. It's about what do you envision for proof of humanity blockchain, or blockchain in general, whatever you want to answer. I know it's a DAO, decentralized, but what are your personal ideas about this?
So, I mean, a lot of things are already happening, like the fact that proof of humanity is a DAO, is both has democratic governance, is decentralized arbitration. Like, it works in many aspects. Like, it's a crystallization of ideas that were being pushed by the whole scene for many years. Actually, you can even trace an article from Vitalik of 2013 where he talks about identity corp, and it's fascinating. Like, these things have been around, and now it's like crystallizing, and we're seeing actual prototypes of some of these ideas emerge. What I think that's important to have a clear north for a project like this is making sure that this is a project that is able to impact where it's needed the most. Like, if this is genuinely a technology that can address a terrible problem across the whole globe, which is the fact that most people cannot afford basic means to eat, for shelter, and they don't see their rights being recognized. And we live in a world where there's over 1 billion people that don't have any kind of identity. There's 100 million refugees. Like, if we're able to build technology that is able to face everyone in society, that's UBI really making a significant impact. Something that Vitalik said also in these days that stuck with me is that usually you see innovation happening strictly in the digital realm because it's cheaper to change the digital things. To change digital stuff is faster to iterate, faster to modify, faster to change. Thus, we end up seeing a lot of technology that is simply feeding that digital reality and is completely blind to the physical reality. And you get something like San Francisco, where you have some of the most extraordinary wealth being built over the last generations, and at the same time you see very tragic marginalization in the streets. And this is because software has blinded people from seeing an actual impact in reality, in the physical world. And Vitalik argues like, if we can build technology that makes sure that we're advancing in a direction where we're not being distracted by the shiny mirrors of software and actually pushing for impact in the real, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in the people right next to us. I think avoiding the Silicon Valley mirage, it's like a very important reminder. And I think that one of the things that could make a project like this unique, I think those of us that grew up in the developing world, that grow up in Argentina, you build a sensibility with being aware of, the reality that this world is, and hopefully, if we can do a change with technology, hopefully the new generations will push for that kind of change. Then that I think that's UBI reaching an interesting point. Already so far, this first year has been a tremendous experience and a lot of incredible lessons, and so far so good, but we had to keep on building.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Santi, for your time. It was awesome to listen to your ideas and the whole part. I really like this project, to be honest. So it was a pleasure for me to be here. So thank you very much. And for you all, I'm leaving you on the last part of the event with another use case which targets art and music. So enjoy. Thank you all. Thanks, Santi.
Hi everyone, I'm Nelly Ortiz, Director of Globant's Business Hacking Studio, and I'm very excited to be here today with Facundo Migoya. Facundo is the co-founder and CMO of Enigma.art, the first NFT marketplace focused on music and art in Latin America. Hi Facundo, how are you today?
Hi Nelly, very good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, I'm very excited to start this conversation. And the first question that I think everyone really wants to know is, how was Enigma.art born?
Well, Enigma was born from me and my brother mining Ethereum in our computers and starting to get into the crypto world and investing and trading and exchanging crypto assets. And the news of NFTs reached us when they were selling for the people for 69 million and many other NFTs that sold for a lot of money, and it really blew our minds. So we started to get into more into the NFT world after that, and we wanted to buy NFTs from our favorite Latin American artists, and we quickly realized that we couldn't because there was no marketplace for artists, from native Latin American artists. And we saw this as an opportunity. So basically, that is the first small idea that was, put in our minds. And after investigating and getting to know the smart contracts and getting to know more the mechanics and the models and how every marketplace worked, we realized that this was not only an opportunity to exploit this new technology for a marketplace, but also to reinvent the way that artists are financed all around the world. So after that, with a more formed idea and concept of what we wanted to do, we contacted and started talking to Pop Art and Dale which are two of the biggest music producers in Latin America. And we were all on the same page. Basically, it was like the perfect storm. Pop art was entering the NFT, was trying to enter the NFT space through OpenSea, and Dale Play was trying to create their own smart contracts. And we came with a solution that involved every aspect of what everyone wanted to do, and everyone agreed that this was the solution for the best. Create something from Latin America instead of going to an outside market. And we started working and we became partners. And now after 6 or 7 months, we have already launched our marketplace with a couple of content drops and many other things. And everything is moving really fast. So it's quite amazing.
I love that you just said like the introduction of artists, because I think also, the industry has shifted. So let me ask you one question here. With the rise of NFTs, what do you think is really impacting the industry, like the art and music industry itself?
So basically, the music industry is quite an old model. I think it's an old model that has been trying to reinvent itself from the start of the internet, when piracy was skyrocketing and everyone was crazy because they didn't know how to fix it. And
Like Napster was the
and
big
then they fixed it.
first boom.
Then
Yeah.
and then they realized that they could sell through internet and not only through CDs. And
Mhm.
so they always trying, the industry always trying to catch up. So right now NFTs are moving at a speed that other industries are a snail pace compared to crypto. And I think the music industry is due for a change, and I think this change will come in the form of NFTs, and is already coming with a whole lot of projects, including Enigma. And from Latin America, I think this is a really great project for not only Latin American artists, but also everyone that wants to listen to Latin America, because we are breaking barriers of Latin American artists don't get to maybe reach out to other continents or other audiences. And with NFTs, we really are expanding the borders in which our Latin American artists are really being able to expand their music and expand their audiences. So I think
Right. I love the concept of blockchain and the decentralization, because everything has been so centralized. And we know in the United States, we have like the big studios. And if you don't know them, or if you're not aware of them, or you can have access to them, it's so hard for you to kind of tap in and get money, revenue, even exposure from it.
Yeah.
So the centralization of this and that network, I think, is also such an important part of this.
So definitely. I mean, the long tail of artists right now is not surviving. Only big artists are making money, and this is a huge problem, especially during the pandemic, when 75% of revenue for artists came from shows, and shows
Right.
aren't happening right now. And artists with great music and great audiences, and audiences that love them and want to listen to the music, but the artists don't get enough. They can't monetize their content enough through other means other than shows to be able to afford make living from their music. So I think that is a
Right.
huge problem. And I think the crypto NFTs are here to help democratize the way that artists are financed. And because, for example, Bizarrap is one of the main artists that we have with Enigma, and he, a couple months before going into the world stage, he was a marketing intern in a job that he didn't do music. He basically won the lottery in the music industry, because when you go from nothing to everything in a couple months, I think that's what we can call the lottery in the music industry. And I think what we're trying to do with Enigma is get rid of this only blockbusters make money, and this winner takes all economy, and democratize the opportunity for everyone to be able to finance their music, not because you have the right contacts, but because you make the right music and your music is actually good, and because you you put a lot of effort into it and you get rewarded. So that's basically what we're here to do.
Right. I think I love that part. And I think that's where we maybe start talking about the business model here. I think it's interesting for everyone here to understand really like what's the new business opportunity for these artists in these type of platforms. How can we use these technologies for these artists that are probably not well known, or they are well known, but they want other revenue streams, to use these platforms to create other revenue streams?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite clear. Smaller artists, including, for example, an artist with 400,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, it doesn't even make $1,000 per month. I mean, and it's not enough, So we are creating a community of artists that not only includes musical artists, but also plastic and painters, and a whole community of people, of creative people, that will be able to interact with itself. So it's not only now about music, but also about creating a whole experience from your music. So having your own music combined with maybe a piece of art that you think represents it well. You could use a VR headset to view that whole experience. I mean, the horizon for this type of creativeness is limitless. Many artists already know what are quite crypto savvy, and they already know what they want to do, and they are quite centered. But many artists are maybe they don't know and are quite skeptic about it, and it's a matter of time until artists realize that this is something new and it's something for the best. And with Enigma, we're using the platform of these big artists that we have through all the artists that we have around 100 million monthly listeners in total or more. So using this platform of big artists, we're trying to validate this new technology to incentivize smaller artists that say, oh, look, this huge artist is working with them, and maybe I can work with them. And it's creating a whole validation strategy to help normalize and incentivize the huge base of artists that maybe don't know what is going on, to get into the industry and really create and really bring light to the community that is forming with the whole NFT ecosystem.
Right. And it's so exciting to hear that a lot of artists are so savvy, because I've seen it too here in the United States. That all the artists are getting so into it because they see the potential and they've seen how their friends or peers are making so much money with it. But let's talk to the ones that don't really know, and they're probably a little, kind of like, I don't know about this. It's pretty new. It's very abstract to me. How could you explain to them exactly how can maybe the first move? What would be the first thing they could do to maybe be in a platform like Enigma.art and make their first dollar or their first Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the first step is create a wallet, maybe buy something, start getting to know the ecosystem, start getting to know all the steps that you need to take to maybe buy and also sell. Because maybe for someone that is already in the industry, is maybe it's quite easy, but for someone that doesn't know about what's going on, basically, it's quite hard to grasp what the concept of cryptocurrencies. So maybe first steps is baby steps, like everything. You need to start with something small and work up to something like putting your content in Enigma. And right now with Enigma, we're quite with curated content, so we're working with our own artists that we already have to create content with them and help them with the creativeness of what their NFTs should be like, or what they want to do. But in the future, we have a clear mission, which is to open up the marketplace to everyone. So you know, you would be able to enter the marketplace, put your own upload your own NFTs. So these are the first steps, and I think in maybe next year and before next year, I mean before second quarter next year, everything's moving really, really fast. So I can't really predict when we are going to open up, but you know, as I said, baby steps for everything, and artists that are getting to know, are getting to understand this. I think the best thing to do is, you know, start looking for people that know a bit more about this close to you, because I think if you start to look, everyone, at least one or two people close to you know about crypto. So
Right.
so I mean, if you start to ask, someone will answer. So plus we also, you know, are working with Ripio, which is also our partner, to create, you know, videos and explanatory videos that are quite easy, you know, step to step of what to do, how to create a wallet, how to put your cryptocurrencies, how to buy Ethereum or whatever. So I think the ecosystem is normalizing, and as it grows, and the base of people that buy and sell grows, this will all get even more you know, normalized and standardized and getting easier and easier.
Right.
So yeah.
I think one thing for the audience to understand that, you know, maybe can simplify the concept of blockchain. It really is just, you know, we have an opportunity for everyone that is a creator to go directly to the consumer and sell their content. That's really like the premise of all of this.
Yeah.
And the great part of this too, and is that with the blockchain and the technology that we have now, we can track the people that then sell it again or buy it again, meaning that they can actually have revenue that is coming throughout what we used to call royalties. We still can call it royalties throughout, but then everything is tracked to a technology. So wanted to put that out there because I know a lot of the times, especially when we work in technology, you know, in Globant, it comes more natural to us because we talked about this every day. But for, like, you know, an everyday folk just trying to understand this concept, sometimes it's not that hard to understand. It really is not. It really is. We put content, and with the technology that we have, we can now track it, and we can give the money that people deserve for the content that they create. So it goes back to the creator and not to all the middlemen in the industry that we have now in music.
Yeah, it's crazy because I was trying to, my grandfather is a painter, and he's quite old, he's 80 years old, and I was trying to explain how everything, you know, works, because he's trying to understand, and I think that's great. It's amazing. So I was trying to explain to him that you not only get money from the first sale, but you also get money from all the other sales, and that every time your art is sold, money gets back to you. And he when I told him that, he said, but how does it work? And he, you know, that's so amazing that artists usually don't get to see a resale value in their content. So he was asking, but if I resell it, do I need to keep my painting in a vault, or what do I do with it? So it's really great to see, you know, maybe the older generation also getting to, or trying to understand it more. And yeah, it's crazy, the NFTs technology and crypto and the blockchain is a great technology that I think is here to stay, and the music industry will have to adapt to it, and as it gets more normalized and artists start to get more used to it, everything will become much easier.
I've heard it just yesterday that we're in the Kodak moment of this industry, and we need to adapt or you're gonna be left behind. So you know, it's exciting moments. You know, Facundo, thank you so much for talking today with us. It's been exciting just learning from you and Enigma. And I just close with, you know, blockchain is making so many radical changes, and not only in the music and media industry, but really across everything.
Yes, everything.
This is just a great example of how an application, you know, in the blockchain could change multiple business revenues, lives of people, exposure, and how can we, you know, grow in different types of industries. So
Yeah.
exciting times for sure. Thank you,
Very,
Facundo.
very exciting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nelly.